Welcome to the LDN radio show, brought to you by the LDN Research Trust. I'm your host, Linda Elsiegood. I have an exciting lineup of guest speakers who are LDN experts in their field. We will be discussing low-dose Naltrexone and its many uses in autoimmune diseases, cancers, etc. Thank you for joining us. This show is sponsored by our members who made donations. We'd like to give them a very big thank you. We have to cover the monthly costs of the radio station's software, bandwidth, phone lines and phone calls to be able to continue with the radio show. And thank you for listening. Today my guest is Charlotte from the United States, who takes LDN for Hashimoto's thyroiditis. Thank you for joining us today, Charlotte.
Hello.
Could you tell us, how old were you when you noticed there was something wrong with you?
So I noticed something was kind of going on with me around the age of 30. After I had my daughter, I started to have some symptoms of rashes and extreme fatigue.
Mm-hmm.
And then I kind of didn't I just thought it was just age. I really didn't know what was wrong.
Mm-hmm. So what did you do? Did you tell your doctor at that time, or did you just grin and bear it?
Well, so at that time, I talked to my doctor, and of course, I got the typical treat the symptoms. We'll put you on some, allergy medicine for the rash. You're a young mom with 2 children. You're tired for that reason. And I kind of just lived with the symptoms. And it wasn't actually until about a year ago that I started to really consult with my doctor to dig deeper and find out what was wrong with me. So I actually got diagnosed with Hashimoto's in the fall of 2017, so fairly recently.
Mm-hmm. So when you were diagnosed, at that point, what would you say a normal day for you was like?
Oh, it was It was awful. A normal day would be sleeping for 10 hours through the night, but waking up around 3 a.m., waking up feeling completely exhausted after sleeping 10 hours. I remember just almost falling asleep on the way to work. So even after sleeping all that time, I can only really describe it as debilitating fatigue. By the end of the day, I just wanted to go to bed. I became kind of antisocial, didn't really want to do much. Everything felt very overwhelming. So even small tasks were very overwhelming. I was always cold. So at this point in my journey with the disease, I was freezing all the time. I didn't sweat when I worked out, which I thought was kind of interesting, and I didn't realize till later that was part of the Hashimoto's. So I was pretty much at a point where I was completely, not feeling human, but my thyroid levels were coming back normal. So my regular primary care doctor said, "There's nothing wrong with you. Your thyroid levels are great." But I sought out a different doctor who was willing to explore other options.
Mm-hmm. So, how long ago? You said 2017 when you were diagnosed, is that right?
Yes,
Mm-hmm.
That's correct.
Okay. So at that point, when you were diagnosed, what medication were you given?
I was given a natural desiccated thyroid hormone, so I started on Armour at a very low dose, and I eventually went up to 45 milligrams, but switched to MP thyroid, and that's what I still take to this day. But at that point, other than the vitamin D prescription I had, those are the only 2 medications I took.
Mm-hmm. And did you adjust your diet at all?
Yeah, so I'm actually a corporate wellness strategist. So wellness is my complete whole life for the last decade. So I was already doing a lot of lifestyle factors like
Mm-hmm.
working out, avoiding gluten and dairy. I had done that for years already. I did, at the time of diagnosis, I found another, a Hashimoto's Facebook page that talked about autoimmune paleo. And I did try that diet. That diet proved to be a little bit interesting for me. When I reintroduced nightshades in particular, I started to get a new symptom of extreme joint pain. And also on that diet, I gained weight. So I gained 7 pounds. Most people lose weight. And it was actually after that diet that I went back to my doctor and talked about LDN.
Mm-hmm. And how open was your doctor?
I'm sorry?
How open was your doctor to prescribing LDN?
Oh, so actually this doctor in particular actually mentioned it to me first. And at that point, I hadn't known very much about it. So upon my diagnosis, he talked about it a little bit, and I said, I don't want another medication. So when he talked to me about it, that's when the diet wasn't working for me. That's when I went back and did some research on LDN and actually found the LDN Trust Facebook page and really dug deep. And when I realized the benefits and the stories behind it, that's when I went back to him and said, okay, I want to try it. And so he was more than happy to prescribe it to me. And he actually told me one or two things will happen in his what he's seen in his practice. Either nothing will happen at all, or you'll feel better. So he started me off at a 1.5 milligram dose, and I started right there, and I took it for about 2 or 3 weeks, and then I started to feel kind of bad again. I felt really great the first 2 weeks. I felt like I never felt before. Energy, sleeping really well through the night. I wasn't cold anymore. I started to sweat during my workouts, and then I started to feel kind of blue and tired again. And so I had actually reached out to the Facebook page, which is a huge lifesaver, and I kind of wrote my symptoms and kind of how I was starting to feel. And someone said, skip a night, and if you feel better the next day, you just needed to skip a night and clear your receptors. And so I did just that, and I felt 100% better the next day, probably better than I'd felt ever since I can remember. And so that's kind of the approach I took from then on out. And I think I actually gave my doctor a bit of knowledge in that area because I told him kind of what I learned. And I'm so happy for that page because I think if I would have kept feeling the way I felt, I would have just stopped the medication completely. But skipping a night so once a week I would skip a night, and then I would never have that same experience. And now, 9 months later, so I've been taking LDN for 9 whole months, I'm up to 4.5 milligrams, and I only skip a night once a month now, if that. So it's been an amazing, life-changing experience.
Mm-hmm. So what would you say a normal day for you is like now?
A normal day now is 7 hours of sleep. I can actually go to bed later and enjoy my free time after my kids go to bed. I wake up with energy, so I wake up ready to take on the day. I actually don't even need caffeine anymore to get me through. I just drink tea, like a green tea in the morning. I can think clearly, so when people conversate with me, I can actually process what they're saying, which is huge. The brain fog was so bad before, I might not even understand what someone just said. I can find my words, so before I would be conversating with someone and I wouldn't even know the word I wanted to say next. So I have, absolute brain fog is eliminated. I have energy. I sweat. I'm not cold. The only thing that hasn't changed is the joint pain that I get from eating nightshades. So it's getting better. But if I still have a pepper, I might be in for it that night with carpal tunnel pain. But other than that, I have almost complete resolution of my symptoms.
Well, that's amazing. And how did you manage with your children when you were having to sleep, 10 hours?
Well,
how did they ever wake up in the night? When you've got a new baby, they tend to do that and need your attention. And when they need it now. Yeah. How did you cope?
Well, it was really rough, and I have to say I leaned on my mother for support a lot. She helped me with my household stuff, so because I work a lot, I'm also an Army reservist, so I spend my 1 week in a month away from my kids in my house. So she really helped pick up a lot of the chores that I just didn't have the energy to do. I have to say I wasn't the best mom. My children had the iPad in front of them or the TV on so I could lay there. And then my husband, who now joins us, he was actually active duty Army and now he's retired, but he got the best of me because when he actually gets to spend time with us now, I'm actually better. So I actually have energy for everything. But I really leaned on other people a lot to cope. Now I feel like a great mom because if they want to play a board game in the evening, I'll do it. If they want to go outside and play, I'll do it. I have the energy to do that. I remember laying in bed and getting home from work by 5 and laying in bed and not being able to move. And that was a bad feeling. And now it's like, hey, yeah, I'll stay up till 10. I'm good with that. Like, I have the energy to do that. So it was really hard for me, but you manage and you just get through, and that's kind of how life is. And I guess I didn't realize how bad it was until I got better.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
So.
Yes. Well, I'm sure your children really appreciate the fact of having a mum that can play and join in and not just lie on the sofa.
Yeah. Yeah, and feed them real meals, and be attentive. Mm-hmm. I noticed that before I just wasn't, I just couldn't. I couldn't do much. So I would just be, whatever they needed, I'd make sure they have it, but I wasn't involved, I'd say.
Okay. Wow. And of course, your husband having his wife back, is a big thing as well, isn't it? To actually be able to socialize as well.
Yeah, and that's another thing is I'm a naturally introverted person, but I didn't realize how bad the Hashimoto's had made it worse of just not wanting to be social. Like just the thought of doing something outside of my normal activities of going to work and coming home mm-hmm. was completely overwhelming. So that is something that is, I was like, wow, I didn't realize I actually like to do this,
Yes. Wow. Well, such an inspirational story, and thank you very much for sharing it with us today.
Yes, and thank you so much for giving me the opportunity. I know when I was in my journey of trying to figure out solutions, the LDN Trust page and then the interviews that you do really helped me have courage to try something new, and I appreciated that so much. So I hope that somebody has the same thing from hopefully my story.
I'm sure they will, and thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a wonderful day.
This show is sponsored by our members who made donations. We'd like to give them a very big thank you. We have to cover the monthly costs of the radio station's software, bandwidth, phone lines and phone calls to be able to continue with the radio show. And thank you for listening. Any questions or comments you may have, please email me, Linda, Linda, at ldnrt.org. I look forward to hearing from you. Thank you for joining us today. We really appreciated your company. Until next time, stay safe and keep well.